Conflict. Get a grip. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Men's Breakthrough Hangout, where we dive into and we tackle the challenges faced by men in business, relationships, and society. I'm your host, Martin Lopez, and together with my co-host, Dr. Stephen Frueh, we love tackling the topics that most people think are off limits. And today we're going to tackle a topic that's often avoided, and it sends shivers down our spines: conflict. Now, one of the things you got to understand is conflict isn't something that we should avoid. You don't have to be afraid of conflict. We don't have to fear it. It's just merely an uncomfortable exchange of words or a clash of opinions that we have. So conflict is a powerful force. It's filled with potential for growth and understanding. But the question is, how do we harness this power? Well, one way is to break out the wisdom from this book that I have found, this amazing book that my buddy, Dr. Stephen Frueh, gave to me and to Ingrid when we spent the weekend up at his house with him and his wife. The book is called From Marginal to Magnificent. Welcome back, Dr. Frueh. How are you doing? Let's talk about how this awesome book helps us deal with conflict.
There's 3 weeks of the year that I should never work again the rest of my life. One of them is the week of April 15th, because I hate the blankety blank IRS and all the nonsense that goes with it. The second one is the last week of August, when everybody's out of town and canceling on me. And the third one is a gift, the week between Christmas and New Year's. Those 3 weeks I should never work. So I start the podcast kind of grouchy because I just got through with all my tax stuff and I don't like doing it. And I'm kind of spoiled and stamp my feet and kind of complain a lot. So that's how I'm doing. That's how I'm doing. This idea about conflict and actually the book, Marginal Magnificent, the idea about conflict for me, originated in my own relationship with my wife of now 35 years. That slowly revealed to me that I didn't know my head from my feet about conflict. I didn't know how to engage it. I didn't know how to what to do with it when it showed up. I was afraid of the anger in my wife, or I was afraid of her strong opinions. I was afraid I didn't have the studs to the muscle to really have intelligent conflict with her. And I certainly didn't embrace conflict in my own family, which were passively compliant people, religious people, and didn't mentor for their children what conflict is about. So that's as quick as I can give you a thumb on that.
That's cool. Well, one of the things that one of the points that you make in the book is you talk about, you're talking about like how conflict, how we try to avoid it or manage it or deny it or fear it or misuse it. That's one of the challenges you talk about. That's one of the challenges that we face with conflict.
Right. What happens is the enculturation, you might say, of conflict in business. They talk about management of conflict. They talk about conflict management classes. They have a lot of intellectual CEO brain kind of stuff around reason, sequence, rationality, all that stuff around conflict. We try to, as much as possible, homogenize it. Now, what happens there, however, is we men are from the warrior caste, a lot of us, warrior class, and we kind of are hardwired for conflict in some way, and we big time need mentorship in noticing, first of all, what is conflict and what isn't. And if we can notice it, we don't deny it, turn away from it, run away from it. We say, a lot. Wow, something big going on here. First thing, noticing it. Second thing is, wow, I am somewhat frightened here, or I am over my head here, or I am incompetent here, or I am whatever I am in conflict. I have to notice that in myself, notice that in my history, in my family. Maybe conflict was violent. Maybe Man I know recently said, "Oh yeah, I was raised in a very normal, healthy family. Of course, my father beat us up every now and whenever we were bad, but ha ha ha.
Other than
That's the
that,
way it
everything was
goes."
fine.
Yeah, we thought it was normal.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, in today's world, we would say his father was abusive.
Yeah.
His father shoved his mother in the kitchen when he didn't agree. His father had a couple pops or something, and then would shove his mother or yell at his son, shame his daughter. He was an abusive father. But in his family, nobody ever said that's abusive. He
Yeah.
just said, well, I guess that's the way it is. So he grew up with an idea about conflict that wasn't in his best interest or his children's best interest. So identifying what it is in you, those are two things. And then the third thing is to expose that to a trusted other, to talk about conflict with someone that you trust, a therapist, a coach, my team, breakaway, with me, with the men work I do, whatever you do, to pick somebody, a good friend, and talk about where you are with conflict long before you try to do anything about it. We want you to get it up where you can see it, feel it, touch it, smell it, know what it is for you. Fourth thing, conflict almost always contains gold. Always hidden in conflict is something precious. Reason for that. Remember, we are highly socialized warriors. We don't have training, mentoring to say, hey, wait a minute. Some men do, but a lot of men do not. What were you going to say?
Let's slow down because you threw a lot of really good stuff out. So, I just took some notes. It's like, so notice, and in men's breakthrough, curiosity theory, the different programs I talk about, notice is you got to find the gold. And so I think it's to look and understand, like, the conflict is telling you something, and you have to identify the conflict. That's the trigger. The trigger would be to identifying the conflict. And then, like you said, wow, what's the wow? How was the emotion? Understand what emotion is being triggered, what emotion is being brought up.
And
I
what
think
memory? Emotion and memory.
And that's the next step. Then I say,
yeah.
And then look back, because I think when I'm let's talk about that. Let's talk about the emotion really quick, because the emotion is in the present, and it's also a memory. It's also a memory, correct?
Yeah.
So I'm experiencing it right now, and I'm experiencing a memory from the past. So the opportunity is to look back and see, is it an opportunity to heal? But sometimes in business, we just need to work through it. Like, I don't have time to do a healing right now. I'm in the middle of a transaction. I just got triggered. So notice that. I noticed I just got triggered, and I'm feeling wow. And so what I have to do is I have to have a way to manage myself in this moment. I do not have a moment for healing because I'm in negotiations.
Right. Yeah.
So I've got to be able to, how do I set that aside? That's
how
the
do
thing.
you how do you capture the memory?
Yeah.
I have a male client who said recently that he has this trouble with his wife every time they disagree about something. And he said the other day she said something and it was insulting to me. I didn't like it, but I didn't know what to say. I wanted to say, shut up, bitch, and walk out and slam the door. But that's my old pattern. So I didn't want my old pattern because I'm doing this work with you, Stephen. So I'd like to have a new way of doing that. And I said, well, what do you remember about conflict? He said, I remember when I was 11 years old and my brother, who was 9, did something and I confronted him, and my mother reached over and shoved me and said something to me. And I told my mother, don't ever do that to me. And my father walked in the door at that point, 11 years old. My father walked in, who was a big guy, ex-football player, grabbed his 11-year-old son, threw him against the wall, and said, you will never talk to your mother that way in this house. That's my wife. Like that. Yeah. So he said, that was just stamped on my consciousness. So he said, when I'm getting into conflict with my wife, I often kind of reenact that in my brain in some way, that I'm going to get punished or I'm going to get shamed for standing up to her, for saying no. You may not.
Well, I think it's also something else too. You also learn a pattern. You also learn how to deal with it. So yeah, it may be that I'm going to feel shame and I'm going to get hurt. But you know what? If I was that little guy, I also learned how to deal with that. So now I'm going to now bring that into my current life. And when somebody does something, how do I handle that? Because the thing is that when we look at patterns and we look at stuff, there was a resolution. And I think human beings are always looking for resolution. Men are looking for resolution. We want to resolve things because we want to bring ourselves up back to status quo. So if I'm looking at my memory, like you talked about, like, wow, let me look back and let me see the memory. How did dad handle it? Well, what did dad do? Well, dad fixed the situation. Well, I didn't like how the situation felt, but I know how to fix situations. That's to grab somebody, throw them against the wall, and tell them, don't ever fucking talk to me like that. Don't ever fucking
Yeah.
talk to your wife that way. So now
Yeah.
my new pattern to move forward into life is like to grab my clients or situations and like, listen, don't ever do that to me. So now so now we have this, we not only have a memory, we not only have a trigger, but we have this reaction that we have that's now built into us that
Habit.
we don't it's a habit. We
Yeah.
don't want to do it, but we don't have access to another way because we
Yes.
only have that way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is an automatic, that we don't have to think about it. It's automatic. And the problem is it gets us out of the problem. So you can get an example. My wife says something and I blow up at her. Actually, let me tell you a real quick story. So when I was in seventh grade, Stephen, Dr. Frueh, when I was in seventh grade, and I think I told you a story before, and I'll tell it really quick. There was this guy that wanted to beat me up. I got scared that afternoon, and we didn't fight that day. That afternoon, I was playing out in front of the house. My neighbor, Mr. Warner, saw me, asked me to, and I always hang out with him. And I was sitting there talking to him. He brought me over. He said, hey, everything going good? I go, yeah, this guy wants to beat me up. Mr. Warner taught me how to fight that day and said, you know what, the guy's being a bully. This is what you do. You just go after that bully. And this is how he taught me how to fight. I'm like, cool. The next day I went and I beat the guy up. He wanted to beat me up. I was afraid he's bigger than me and everything. I won that fight. So what I had learned is a pattern. How you deal with somebody coming at you is you bring them more force. And I took that into all of my life, into my business, in negotiation. And I never thought about that until I was married. And then one day I saw myself arguing with my wife and I was like, whoa, I remember where I learned this. And how it served me. And it served me so well. And then I became aware of it and realized, and I call it trigger, react, regret. So when I get triggered, my reaction is to fight and I regret it. I have a mess to clean up. And I no longer wanted to have to clean up that mess. I no longer wanted to represent myself as that way, but I didn't know how to work through it.
Right. In Oklahoma, when I was consulting there for a while, the men talked about men who man up, who kind of fill themselves with this energy, and it's very dangerous, and it's not very solution oriented. So, but
it isn't. So, and this is why I want to like look at both sides, because the solution that we do, the reaction, we end up regretting. It ends up destroying our marriage. It ends up hurting people. Ends up, it does solve a problem, but it doesn't build anything. It doesn't evolve us.
So the problem
we have to learn. Go ahead.
Yeah, the problem wasn't solved.
Yeah.
What happened is the problem was never articulated.
What do you mean?
One of the things you have to notice in conflict is that what they taught in therapy school 101. They taught you say if you have preschool teachers and you're working with preschool teachers say, Martin, use your words. Stephen, use your words. We're 5 years old. We're 4 years old. You took my truck. I want to bash you with another truck. And this preschool teacher says, use your words. And so what happens is if you can teach little boys that, they start to say, I don't like it when you took my truck. And Martin will say, well, I like your truck or something. They'll work it out. But if you bash them with the truck, you accelerate it, you expand it. So what happens a lot of times in conflict is the conflict itself. In my marriage, I would assume that she didn't know what she was talking about and I knew better. I was smarter. I saw it clearer. And I would use my force or I'm a little older than her, my age or whatever, to overwhelm her, to push her. And she, out of, I think, her love or maybe her father in problem or whatever it is, but she would back off. So our
Mm,
marriage in that way would stay rather dysfunctional
yeah.
until the day that we both started to say, we're not dealing with conflict real well, are we? How can we? And
Yeah.
then when we start to, that's when you start to say, well, what's really going on here? What's
Yeah.
actually happening? He took my truck. Oh,
Yeah.
what's going on, Martine? What? I liked his truck. It's a yellow
Yeah.
truck. I liked it. What? Well, have you thought that maybe he didn't want you to take your truck? You start to talk about what the actual issue is, and
Yeah.
with the grown-ups, it's just as simple as preschool, really, except that we are somewhat shamed by having to stop, look, and listen, and
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But once we can, we start to, oh, these are the issues. You don't want to get to the solution, not yet. You
Yeah.
just want to get to the issues. Where, by the way, we've talked about, had a session about active listening. You want to
Yeah.
get into the whole thing about active listening. I don't want to go on and on, but I want to.
Yeah. So let's. So I like how you summed it up, because I wrote the notes, and the last thing I wrote was talk. And
Yeah.
I'm writing a new book. It's called You 2.0, and it's like, what is the number one thing that I did, after my, when I was separated, after my divorce, dealing with all of that. What is the number one thing I did? Was talk. It was talk. And we need the opportunity to talk. So what happened when I realized that I was acting out something in seventh grade, but I was now acting it out as a adult male in a marriage? What did I need? Well, it was awareness, but the next step was to talk. I need to get this out. And the only way I can get this out, the only way I can have any type of resolution, is to talk, because the fighting thing, the way that I approached it, that wasn't any good. That's like, I'm done with that. I'm done with that result. I'm like done with that one. But yet what got us there, what got us here won't get us there. So I need a new set of tools. I need a new understanding. I need a new perception. I need something different than my current way of thinking, talking, feeling, expressing, all that. And it was through talking, and I didn't know how to talk. That's the thing. We need to you, as a man, you got to be okay not knowing how to talk. It's okay, and you got to be willing to fumble and make mistakes in your talking, because it will work itself out if you start talking.
Well, yeah, and of course, with talking comes listening, the capacity to listen.
Yeah.
In the book, we have 4 steps for increasing your self-esteem or your sense of self-worth, which is really right in the middle of this whole conversation about conflict. Because the first one is self-awareness.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
That's you're saying I want to talk about what's going on here. What's happening right now? I'm uncomfortable.
My
Huh,
thoughts, my feelings, the images
I'm
that are showing up,
scared. Yeah, the
the
images.
drama that I'm creating, the
Yeah,
drama that's
sure.
happening, the stuff that I'm obsessed, my obsessions, what I'm obsessed with, and then my habits and my patterns. All that, all that happened in that self-awareness. I
In
didn't
that
identify
self-awareness,
it all,
yes.
but when I
Yes.
reflect, it was like, yeah, I noticed it all. But
Yeah. And the
the
second step is the willingness is the word. Write it down, people. The willingness. Willingness is a big word. Write it down on the palm of your hand and walk around looking at it. Because willingness means you engage within yourself. No
yeah,
longer are you denying, avoiding, explaining yourself, defending yourself. Willingness to encounter yourself. What is going on? I'm afraid. I feel incompetent. I feel overwhelmed. I have memories of. I have this. I have that. Like he just said, and so you want to encounter as much as you can
yeah,
in the shortest period of time. This is
yes,
who I am right now.
yes.
I'm aware of this, and I'm encountering this. Huh? You don't need to do anything more right there. You just need to go. Huh?
Yeah, so let me use what you're saying here. So it's the dissonance, the polarities. It's encounter those. Like
Yes.
like just to it's almost like I'm saying, I'm going to explore these. I'm going to play with those. I'm going to be curious about these. Like, what is it?
Yes.
What am I unmasking? What are the contradictions? Like, let me just look at that. and be able to look at it from a neutral standpoint, without judgment, without complaint, without blame. That's what I call my little three horsemen of curiosity.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look at the contradictions and the self-revelations that I'm seeing in myself, but I'm not going to judge myself, not going to complain about myself, and I'm not going to judge, and I'm not going to judge, and I'm not going to blame anybody else, and I'm going to refrain from that so I can look at this neutrally. And that's how I apply that.
So you can keep it. I mean, I know it sounds like we're throwing a lot of stuff here at you, but you can keep it simple if you remember awareness, encountering it, and you get a feel for what that's about. And then you look to the natural third step, which is disclosure, which is I need to have a significant other than the partner I'm facing a conflict with. I need to have a significant other, a coach, a therapist, a priest, a pastor, a rabbi, somebody, a good friend. I need to have someone that I can share some of this with. Boy, when she said that, I got scared that she was going to leave me. Or when she said that, I remembered my father slamming my brother up against the wall and saying, you may not talk to your mother that way. And I thought, whoa, what's that? So I disclose that to a significant person that can hear me, who won't try to change me, who won't try to educate me, who won't try to shape me, who will simply say wow and gee and tell me more.
Those 100%. Three. Well, the other thing on that is because as you disclose, as you go through this self-disclosure, you're starting to hear yourself. And then it kind of goes back and it gives you more of an encounter, more self-awareness. And so I see what happens. And you're kind of like, it's kind of like the little, what is it? The little stone is rolling and gathering more moss. You're like, wow, this is interesting. You're starting to understand yourself. And then you're able to make different choices because the awareness is there.
Remember that the key word in these three things so far, we got one more to go before we finish, but the key word is self-awareness, self-encounter, self-disclosure. So you're talking about opening this area. And remember, reaction to or defense of in conflict is not about self. It's about habit and learning and pattern.
And real quick, before you go on, and I thank you. And then the thing is that oftentimes, men, what we try to do is we have an idea. So then we go back to our partners to try to work that idea out. And we don't have what I call the listening, they call that landmark. You don't have the listening. You may not have you may not be giving the respect, or you may be vocalizing it in a way that you have the intention of working through it, but yet there's still the pain for the other person still there. So you then we can then trigger each other, and then we fall back into this space, and then we just give up again. Like, wow, forget that. I really tried to be open with you and honest with you, and that's really good. That's really good to do that, but it requires training. It does require a higher awareness for you to explore this with a partner, because partners, you don't know what they're going through, and you don't know how they're hearing what you're saying. And you may have all the intention of being positive and being loving and all that. It just may not come across that way. They still have their experience of it.
You have to remember, men, that you're listening to. Martine and I are a little bit different in this conversation, so don't be afraid of that. But you have to remember that the first three are really not about her. They're about you. You're about your awareness. And we could go for a whole weekend on these four things, believe me. But they're about how you do that, how you increase your sense of awareness. They're about your awareness. They're about your encounter, what that is. That's the foundation for any good work with a psychotherapist or a coach or whatever, is its self-encounter. And the third one is self-disclosure. That's about you. That's about you. And going down and going in and facing, gee, what do I bring to the table right here? Not about her.
Yeah. And
just
that's
forgive
why.
her. Forgive her. Let her alone for a minute.
Yeah.
Say, I've got some work to do. I got some work to do.
And sorry, I keep interrupting you. I apologize. And that's why if we bring this up to our partners, it's still about us. And so we're not really about them. And
Right.
so like what I've noticed in conversation, it's like your partner is like, well, what, where is this? How does this help me? How does this help me? Because we are selfish individuals. And so it's like, well, this is me, this is me, this is me. But we don't necessarily express it that way. We don't necessarily express it like about me. We're like, hey, this is what I learned about you. Every time you say this, I get pissed off. And that might be an awareness that you have.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
you could do is you could trigger the other person. So I like what you're saying is understand that this is about you and
Yes.
keep working on you separate from the relationship.
Now
And
the power move
yeah,
is the four. I'm rushing. I'm interrupting you a little bit because
that's
we
okay.
don't have much time. The power move really is the fourth one we call self-resolve
Mm,
or self-resolution. You know what
resolution.
that's
Yeah.
about? That's where you move into deep, intentional listening. If you don't know what active listening is about, learn it because it's a real critical competency for every man I ever met and every man I work with.
Yes.
Active listening takes those three things you bring. Now you've gone to the gym, you've worked out, you've got some sweat going, and now you're with your partner, and you say, "Who are you really?" And you shut up and let her or him tell you who they are,
Yeah.
and then you ask intelligent questions. We should do a whole podcast, 15-minute podcast on active listening because there's a lot more than I'm saying here.
And we're not
But
good at 15-minute podcasts.
no, we're terrible at it. And I always think we wear people out. But if you can get into active listening, that's the gift as a male that you bring to her.
Yeah.
That's the gift.
Yeah.
That's a
And
profound gift.
100%.
Okay? Yeah.
And what I want to say about that is, so you're doing your work, man. You're doing your work in Dr. Frueh's diagram here. You're doing your work. You're doing your self-awareness work. You're doing your self-encounter work. You're doing your self-disclosure work. So you're starting to understand yourself. And as in empathy to me is being able to now be able to listen to for somebody else to be able to understand them. And with this new way of understanding yourself, it, for me, I think it gives you empathy that other people want to understand themselves too. So that listening is discovery and understand, like, oh, I'm learning this new stuff about my wife Ingrid. I'm learning this new stuff about all this other stuff, right? Wow, this is really great. I'm getting to know you. And I don't need to tell you about me and all this other stuff that I'm going through because as I'm getting to know you, my muscle for listening, my muscle for loving, my muscle that I'm building inside of here for connecting is all growing. I get to experience this new version of life and love and all those things, all the stuff I wanted to. And I'm not blowing up. I'm not attacking. I'm simply listening. And if you're saying something that I don't like, I'm going to explore that. Like, wow, there's another thing I don't like. Wow. And then let me go back. Why don't
Well,
I like
see,
that? I can do that work on myself.
active listening actually gives you a kind of a framework for doing that.
Yeah.
What you have to remember, we have to circle back to right at the beginning. We talked about the warrior self in men. The warrior self is uh, hardwired to defend and attack. He's a warrior. So that's in us. It's not like something that you're screwed up about. It's in you, and we have to learn how to understand it and how it shows up in relationship.
Yeah.
Well, if you are aware of the warrior, what do most men do? She starts to say, well, she's not on this podcast. She starts to say, well, when you and he right away wants to straighten her out, explain himself, defend himself, clarify her thinking. He's back in business. He's in the CEO brain. He's in the warrior brain. What's really hard on that fourth step is to say, wow, and tell me more. And really, I don't really understand what you're saying, but I want to. And breathe
I love
and
that.
say, yeah, tell me
Yeah.
more because I thought I knew you. But what I said, that we did our pool 2 years ago. So I'll close with this story for me, and then Martine can close.
Well,
But
let me say something about that and then tell your story. Is that okay?
okay.
Because I want to piggyback on that. So when I'm hearing you talk about the warrior, what we talk about in men's breakthrough, what we talk about in breakthrough and curiosity there, is that warrior that we're talking about is loyal to you,
To you,
and,
yes.
and to you. And what we do, what happens over time with building this muscle is in having connection with your wife, with your partner, whatever, is that warrior becomes loyal to that person as well, becomes loyal to that experience of love, that experience of connection, that experience of working through. And the warrior then becomes strong and very loyal to that power, to that working through. So in a sense, what you're doing is you're rewiring your own brain, you're rewiring your emotions through therapy, through coaching, through all this different stuff. And then your reaction when you get triggered, your reaction is to pause, to stop and reflect and look and decide, based on this new way of being, how do I want to act? How do I want to resolve this? And you start to resolve it based on your values and your virtues in the way that you want it to turn out, which often is, like you said, through active listening. Let me listen here. Is there something I'm missing? I know what's going on here because I work on this. Let me find out what's going on over there.
The
That person,
warrior, the warrior isn't notoriously a good listener. The
yeah,
warrior, the warrior
I disagree with you on that, but I disagree with you on that.
well, what I see, by definition,
Yeah,
he's going in a direction. He's not in a receptive mood. He's
yeah,
not in a receptive mode. And contrast to The Art of War by Sun Tzu, who talks
yeah.
about the receptiveness of the warrior and being able to imagine where your enemy is. That would be a good book for everybody to read, The Art of War, Sun Tzu. But the warrior isn't typically a reflective, listening, empathic kind of character. He's got a purpose and an intention, and he's sharpening his tools to meet that intention and purpose. He needs himself somebody to hold his energy and passion and commitments in a way, in a framework, so that he is safe enough to descend into the stuff we're talking about.
That's what
That's a
happens. And
that's a
yeah,
new
exactly. And I agree with
idea.
you.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. And what I'm suggesting is that as I go through the experiences of having it be safe, having it be respectful, the warrior then comes through that and then becomes loyal to not only myself as a warrior, but to my partner as a warrior.
Yeah.
The role expands, and that's what I'm suggesting. And I have no proof of that. It's part of the theory. It's part of what I do. It's part of how I do that. I want to find the warrior in you to be not only loyal to you, but to loyal to the outcome that you want. It's ultimately about what the warrior wants. It's about what I want. I want to have a relationship of love, kindness, and whatever that is for you, and connection. That's what I'd like to have. In order to do that, it requires this warrior to be strong. That warrior is strong by definition of a warrior. So I need you to be strong in kindness, in love, and connection, whatever those values and virtues you have.
Well, we're out of time.
Yeah.
This comment that Martine just made, that opens up another whole big podcast. So you should know that, because there's so much into, for me, 35 years married this time, and finally getting in a pattern where we both understand what we're doing with each
Yeah.
other and seeing the results of it. What happens is, when you say she's a warrior too, she's a warrior, he's a warrior. Her masculine side is activated, the Jungians would say. His feminine side is activated, and there's a whole bunch of conversation with how a man, a grown-up man and a grown-up woman, will do that with each other, because the gold that they're searching for in relationship is not evident, it's not obvious. It will be revealed as they get further into it. So there's a lot of models and a lot of things to think about there, and
Yeah.
we'll get back to them, because we can't. I'm tempted to go forward. We can't. We're out of time. So thank
Yeah.
you, Mark.
Yes. Yeah. We went over a little bit over time. We want to do
Yeah,
this 15 minutes, 20 minutes max.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was so thank you. So first off, thank you guys for hanging out with us. The new format is you guys seen the new format. This is our new format for doing what we're doing, and very focused. Not that we weren't focused before, but we're very focused. Let us know in the comments things you want us to talk about. If you have anything that you want to interact with us, Dr. Frueh and I are happy to interact with you. We both coach. We both run men's groups. Dr. Frueh is in the LA area. I'm in the San Diego area. We have clients all over the place. Do you do Zoom
Yes.
consulting?
Yeah.
Okay, so we both do Zoom consulting. We do that, we do all the stuff that we do, and we're very committed to men having great lives. I can tell you, when I spend time with Lynn and Dr. Frueh, and with Dr. Lynn probably too, it's just what he's talking about and what he talks about in his book. That's what they represent. You Dr. Frueh and his wife Lynn, they represent what he talks about, like how to be powerful, how to be vulnerable, how to be warriors, and be honest in all that, and then stay engaged. It's beautiful. And so, guys, I know a lot of us out there don't think that we can have those relationships. The thing is that we're evolving as humans, we're evolving as men, and we can have those relationships. It's hard to do it on your own, really hard to do it on your own. So I want to encourage you to reach out to a therapist, reach out to a coach, reach out to us, reach out to Dr. Frueh. His number will be in the comments, and his contact information will be in the comments, as well as mine. So thank you again. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and with another topic.
Yeah. Stay hot on the trail, guys. See you in 2.